I wanted to bring today's episode to the podcast talking about the blood chemistry review, which is included in our Fab Fertile Method. Again, this is to educate, not to diagnose, and really how do we look at these different themes that are going on with your blood chemistry. And we're also using functional testing as well as your health history. But today we're focusing on the blood chemistry and what is off. So many times people worry that, they've been told everything is normal, or maybe they've been told there are some areas in there. So we're talking about healing opportunities, what this means for your fertility, really doing a deep dive into our blood chemistry review so you can figure out what's happening for your situation. So thanks again for being here. Are you stuck in a food rut, not sure exactly what to eat to enhance your fertility? I'm excited to announce that our summer fertility recipe guide is ready. All you need to do is go to FertilityDietFreebie.com to grab your free copy. And your free guide includes a meal plan, grocery shopping list, and everything you need to get started with nourishing foods that improve your chances of pregnancy success. All you need to do is go to FertilityDietFreebie.com. That's FertilityDietFreebie.com, FertilityDietFreebie.com. I didn't need to go to donor eggs. Obviously, I don't regret it. I have beautiful children. I could have done things differently. I was still cycling back in my 20s. I could have looked at my health, the environmental toxins, the stress I was under.
Many women are being told their eggs are too old. That's an assumption. You can't test egg quality.
Many times it's the man. It's the man who's got a food sensitivity or the zinc deficiency.
There can be a root cause to these quote unquote period problems. The doctor will pass you a pill without any question of why.
Why is IVF the first step? Because we believe it should be the last step. Welcome to Get Pregnant Naturally, where functional medicine and natural fertility solutions will help you get pregnant and have your baby. Hey there, I'm Sarah Clark, founder of Fab Fertile and your host. I believe the functional approach is the first step with anyone struggling with infertility, and my aim is to help you get pregnant naturally. Today, I'm welcoming Justine Altman back to the podcast, and we're digging into what your blood chemistry results mean for your fertility. Justine is part of my team here at Fab Fertile. She's an integral part of our couples coaching program, which uses functional lab testing, diet, and lifestyle changes to dramatically improve conception. So if you're struggling with infertility, your body is desperately trying to tell you something, and focusing on your health will either help you get pregnant naturally, or if you do need to go to the fertility clinic, it will improve your chances of success. Justine is a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner. She was diagnosed with PCOS and struggled with infertility. She had her first baby with fertility treatments, but after taking a functional approach, she was able to conceive her second child naturally. Thanks so much for listening. I'm so thankful that you're here. Make sure you hit subscribe. And if you know someone else who is on the fertility journey, please share this podcast with them. Hey, Justine, excited to have you back on the podcast.
Hey, Sarah, thanks for having me.
Awesome. So today we are going to talk about the blood chemistry review. So this is something we do as part of our Fab Fertile Method, not to diagnose, but to educate. And really, many times people have come to us and it's frustrating. They've been told that everything is normal on their blood chemistry, or maybe there's a few things that are off, but no one's really kind of connected the dots to see how that would impact their fertility. Obviously, we're dealing with low AMH and high FSH and premature ovarian insufficiency and diminished ovarian reserve. And so people are worried that when we do some of the functional testing and looking at blood chemistry, that we won't find anything. And I have to say that hasn't been the case. There's always underlying clues and reasons why for us to dig deeper and looking for the root cause. And again, we're not diagnosing, we're educating. So it all tells a story. When you look at your health history and then combined with the testing, then you can develop that really targeted plan. The blood chemistry side of things is part of that, and it really looks at themes. So what's your take, Justine?
Yeah, well, like you said, we don't ever find nothing.
Yeah.
There's always something for us to optimize. And just as you said with the themes, it's not so much sort of really getting hung up on any one marker in a complete blood chemistry, right? It's more about like, do we see patterns that, do we see a number of different markers that maybe all could be caused by a little underhydration or something along those lines? And so we start to see patterns that are coming out that really help advise us on exactly what little tweak to our diet or our lifestyle might make a big difference on the body overall.
So let's just talk about the difference between functional reference ranges, which are for healthy people. It's a tighter reference range, And then the reference range that your physician may give to you, which is a wider reference range in people that have disease. Let's kind of just talk about those two different things and why we're looking at this differently.
Yeah. So the name of the game with functional medicine is that we're trying to assess areas for optimizing, right? For helping the body work better in the way that it's supposed to. When a doctor is looking at test results, it's a little different for them because they're using a pretty wide reference range. For example, for glucose, a doctor typically would use anywhere between 65 and 99 to be a good fasting result. In functional medicine, we're looking at 75 to 86. So it's a much tighter window. And the reason for that is because when a doctor is looking at those test results, they're trying to assess, is something dysfunctional enough that it's diagnosable as a disease? And from a functional perspective, we have no interest in diagnosing. Instead, we really want to see, do we have something that's trending in the wrong direction or that's already gone far enough in the wrong direction that we know we sort of need to bring it back to optimum so that that part of the body and in relation, all of the other parts of the body which are connected to it, which is basically everything, can all start to function the way that they're supposed to. And so we want to catch things way before they're ever diagnosable as a disease and help nurture them back into the sweet spot.
Absolutely. So let's talk about some of the things that we're looking at on blood chemistry. So first of all, as part of our Fab Fertile Method, you'll receive a comprehensive list that we're looking for blood work. And one of the ones that we're looking at, it would be the complete metabolic panel. And so let's see what's typically missed. What are some themes that we see on that panel that are missed?
Right at the beginning is glucose. And that's one that we see out of range for a lot of people, out of functional range. It doesn't necessarily mean if it's out of functional range that we're in any kind of danger. It usually doesn't. But it does mean that there's a stress going on in the body. And that stress is happening usually every day if it's something that's related to glucose. And so that's one we see where there's a lot of room for improvement, a really sort of big healing opportunity that hasn't been caught in the past or paid any mind to. And then we have in a typical complete metabolic panel, we've got a number of markers related to kidney function and to liver function. And do we have evidence that either of those organs are struggling? And then we have a number of minerals as well, which sort of helps us tell, are we lacking in any nutrients? Do we have any dehydration going on? Are we getting enough protein? Do we have any challenges digesting and absorbing the foods that we're eating? So there's really a ton of information there that, again, a typical doctor will have a pretty wide reference range that they're looking at. And so it's pretty rare that anything will come back outside of range to a doctor's eyes. But from our perspective, again, there's a whole lot of sort of little areas where we can help make improvements. We can see if the body's not getting quite enough protein to be working the way that it wants to, and if it's not being able to use minerals in the way that it wants to, and if there's some congestion in the liver that's preventing us from doing all the body's good detox work and things like that.
Yeah, because we see a lot of people that are well-fed but malnourished. So that was me. I was eating this really healthy diet, but I wasn't absorbing the minerals. So I was low on a number of these markers. And then we did the hair tissue mineral analysis test, and that further solidified that for me. I'm like, oh, wait, but my potassium was off. There's a whole bunch of other things that were off. And then it started to optimize those using supplements and also targeted diet recommendations. Things started to come back in line. And also many times people can get married to a specific diet. You're like, wait a minute, you're either more plant-based, vegan, vegetarian, or whatever it may be. We get married to these different diets. Our whole thing is to use a personalized approach. And really sometimes people are like, are you going to force me to eat meat? And our whole thing is we're not forcing you to do anything. It's basically, what do the tests say? What is right for your body? And maybe you're not eating enough protein and maybe you need to add some more in, but we're not never going to say, force you to eat red meat if that doesn't work for you. But what you can see if your protein is low, maybe with a vegan plant-based diet, maybe it's not right for you. So it is to really look at that personalized approach.
Yeah, it really just is. It's about, trying to meet your goals with your body's goals at the same time and trying to navigate that the best way we can. And so again, if we've got challenges with diet restrictions or any other kind of restrictions, essentially, every recommendation that we ever make is really super ultra specific to exactly what's going on in your situation and in your body.
Mm-hmm. The next one we have is lipids. So we're looking at your triglycerides, your cholesterol, and really, what's happening there. Obviously, the baby's brain is made of fat. So it's really important. Fats are a precursor for hormones. So it's really important to making sure you're getting enough fat. And if you're like me, for years, I ate that low fat diet, having low fat yogurt and all these low fat things, which, was filled with sugar. which is not very good. So it is making sure you're getting the healthy fat, which I think a lot of us know for fertility, but maybe you may not know that. And then so sort of the themes we see here on the blood chemistry panel with cholesterol. Can you talk a little bit about that, Justine?
Yeah. So, lipids are a really confusing topic. For years and years, we were taught that fats were bad for us. And that's why we all turned to those low fat or no fat options, which I can certainly attest that when I was eating low fat and no fat, I was the sickest I had ever been. Hormones were all over the place. And that's exactly why. It's because, we have to have good, healthy fats in order to make hormones in the body, in order to have a normal cycle that's functioning the way that it's supposed to. And so getting those good, healthy fats in are really important. Cholesterol is really important. And cholesterol is another one, just like fat in general, that's really been villainized. But we know now that we have to have cholesterol in order to make those hormones. And that cholesterol actually does a lot of good things in the body. It helps repair damage when there's damage. And sometimes it gets a bad rap because it can be linked to cardiovascular issues. But in most cases, the cholesterol was there to help address whatever problem was causing a challenge in the cardiovascular system. And so it sort of gets blamed. It's like an innocent bystander that really gets to take all the blame for everything going wrong. But in reality, so we see these numbers in lots of different ways for different people. Sometimes it's high, sometimes it's low, and that can happen for different reasons. But there are a lot of things that contribute, things like some fatty deposits built up in the liver. And that prevents the liver from cycling out old used up cholesterol. And so it starts to build up. Sometimes if we've got oxidative stress, which is a really sort of vague topic, but it essentially, all those things that are high in antioxidants, that's what we're trying to combat with antioxidants is oxidative stress. And we can get oxidative stress from things like toxins or foods that our body doesn't like, or too little or too much exercise. And so those kinds of things can contribute to the lipids being high or being low. And so, the normal story that we hear in mainstream is that, if your cholesterol is high, well, you're eating too much red meat, right? Or you're eating too many fats. But in reality, what we see happen is that our lipid numbers can be high or low for other reasons. And sometimes those reasons are related to our liver, and even the liver further upstream. The reason our liver gets those fatty deposits built up in a lot of cases can have to do with our glucose level and how much sugar and carbohydrates we're taking in. That's what builds up those fatty deposits in a lot of cases. The glucose causes the fatty liver buildup, which then can cause cholesterol to build up in the body. And so it really has, in a lot of cases, relatively little to do with the fats that we're taking in and more to do with the sugars and carbohydrates that we're taking in. There's a ton of carbohydrates and a ton of junk ingredients in all of those low fat or no fat foods that we were used to eating years ago.
Mm-hmm. The next one we have is the complete blood count, the CBC. So let's talk about what's missed in that one.
Yeah. So the CBC gives us a ton of information about not only nutrient status, so whether or not there are any nutrient deficiencies, especially things like iron or B12, but it also tells us some clues about whether there's maybe some dehydration going on or whether there's some kind of respiratory distress, or if there are any signs of infection or other big inflammation. So if the body is really struggling in a big way, we'll tend to see quite a bit going on in the CBC there. But also little, smaller clues, again, to where not necessarily it's picked up by standard Western ranges, but from a functional perspective, we see evidence that there's maybe some kind of imbalance going on with the microbiome. A lot of times in the CBC, we'll see clues that will point us in the direction of thinking that there may be some imbalance with the gut microbiome, right? Where we've maybe got some parasites or bacterial overgrowth or yeast overgrowth. And we'll see that show up in the CBC with some elevated or numbers that are lower than our reference range.
Yeah, again, this is all really telling a story where you're like, wait a minute, then we start doing, potentially if we're doing stool testing, so looking at the DNA of the stool, may have seen there's indication of potential infections with the CBC. So it all kind of correlates. The next one we have is the full thyroid panel. This is something we've talked a lot about on the podcast before, making sure you get a full thyroid panel, not just looking at the TSH, looking at full panel, including antibodies. And it's extremely important for fertility. And if there's a history of miscarriage, really optimizing the thyroid. We can say 99%, maybe 100% of people that we work with, something is off with the thyroid. And even if the TSH is normal and it's fine, it could be an undiagnosed autoimmune issue. Again, we're not diagnosing, but we would see if something's out of balance and you take that to your physician. And then subclinical issues, so not the thyroid, but it could be the gut or the liver. Maybe there is a thyroid issue and you're already taking medication. Well, why is it off to begin with? And then you start to optimize those areas and you can start to bring the thyroid back in line. Anything you wanted to say there?
Just to sort of bring home your point about the full panel, there are so many different sort of ins and outs of how the thyroid works, right? It's a sort of a very long pathway. And there can be a kink in the chain sort of anywhere. And that's why we always recommend the full panel, is because very often there's a TSH that's completely normal, or it's normal by standard Western standards, right? Which is a much wider range than the sweet spot we know is optimum for a human thyroid. And so TSH sometimes will be totally normal, but we'll still have really low thyroid hormone, or we'll have really high reverse T3, which prevents our body from using all the good thyroid hormone. Or we've got antibodies, right, where the body is actually starting to attack itself with the thyroid cells. There's a whole lot going on in the thyroid picture, and it's really important for us to be able to sort of see the whole picture there to know, like, where is the kink in the chain, because the solution, the remedy, is very different depending on what the cause is. The thyroid, we know, is really important for good fertility, that if it's, it doesn't take a whole lot really for the thyroid hormone to be under in order for a body to sort of struggle to have a good cycle and to have a good ovulation and good egg maturation and all of those things. In a lot of cases, it doesn't take a whole lot to support the thyroid, but it's what are those things that are contributing? And sometimes we find that even if we do just support the body with some good diet and some good lifestyle practices, that if there was thyroid hormone on board, in a lot of cases, people are in a position to be able to go to their doctor and to reduce or eliminate their dosage, because basically we've removed the root cause, and the thyroid now can function on its own without the use of medications.
Eating for your fertility does not have to suck, and it is not about deprivation. It's eating food that tastes amazing and nourishes your body as you prepare for pregnancy success. I'm excited to announce that our summer fertility recipe guide is here. Go to fertilitydietfreebie.com. That's fertilitydietfreebie.com to grab your copy. I have worked with a chef with a nutrition background to prepare these summer recipes. This is a 5-day challenge where you'll learn how food impacts your body while enjoying delicious foods. So this is not about you drinking green juice all day long and starving. It is about eating awesome foods. It includes a meal plan and a grocery shopping list. Start this challenge with your partner today. All you need to do is go to fertilitydietfreebie.com. That's fertilitydietfreebie.com to grab your summer fertility recipe guide. And the next one we have is vitamin D. And so that one, when we regularly see it either in the teens or in the single digits, and a functional reference range is from anywhere from 60 to 80. And so many times you could be told in the conventional reference range that everything is normal. And then you may even be told that it's not normal, you need to supplement, but it's also important to be regularly testing that. And, why is your vitamin D low to begin with? So it could be gut infections, there's ovulatory dysfunction or PMS, and then it's needed to help the body create sex hormones. So making sure your vitamin D is optimized is key for fertility. And it's one of our basic supplements that we recommend there in our Fab Fertile store. And you can go to fabfertilestore.com and check out our supplements. And you want to make sure you're doing a D3 and K2 so you can absorb it properly. But vitamin D, what's your take, Justine?
We find this low in just about everyone. And again, like you said, the Western range is pretty low, and sometimes it's up to 50, but a lot of times it's anything above 30 is considered fine. And from a functional perspective, we're looking for 60 to 80. So that's a big difference, a really big difference. One of the things that contributes to this for people in general, for most of the globe anyway, is that we simply don't get enough outside exposure to the sun. And that's primarily how our body synthesizes vitamin D, right? So some of it comes from our diet, of course, and we can supplement with vitamin D. And we do supplement, that's why we recommend it, is because most of us are low. But the reason we're low in a lot of cases is just not enough sun exposure. And in some places, like for me in Michigan or Sarah in Toronto, there's only maybe 2 months out of the year where we actually have the ability to synthesize as much vitamin D as we need to. In other parts of the year, sun exposure isn't possible. So this is something that, in our opinion, for most people, we always want to supplement with, or at least continually be testing every so often to make sure that we're meeting our body's vitamin D needs.
The next one we have is magnesium. This is something that we see that is low on a lot of people as well. It's one of those ones where I did a podcast episode in the very early days of the podcast with Dr. Carolyn Dean. She's one of the world's world-renowned expert on magnesium. I'm talking about 80% of us are deficient in this. I used to have those twitching eye and like the cramp in my legs, the foot cramps, all that with magnesium deficiency can be one of the culprits of that. And there's a whole host of other things that magnesium can be used for. But a deficiency can cause your stress hormone cortisol to elevate, which is interesting because I don't know. Yeah, what is that? The chicken and the egg kind of thing where I'm like, in times of stress, why do my feet cramp up? Like, what's going on? It's like depleting it and leaving. So stress depletes magnesium. So the other day I was traveling, moving, doing all kinds of craziness. Last night, my feet were like cramping like crazy, and I take a daily supplement of magnesium, but I do find like an Epsom salt bath or even like an Epsom salt foot soak can be really helpful for that too. And then it just, it's kind of calming. What's your take on magnesium?
Like you said, deficiency is everywhere, and stress causes it in general, but alcohol really eats up a lot of magnesium. And when we have low magnesium, it can lead to anxiety situations. Magnesium is a calming mineral. And so if we don't have enough of it, our body struggles to be calm. And so it leads to anxiety, it leads to sleep challenges. And so we know, that like those Epsom salt baths, Epsom salt is a form of magnesium, and we absorb it really well through our skin. And so Epsom salt foot soak or a bath is a really amazing way to get a big dose of magnesium right away. And sometimes can make the foot cramps or whatever muscles are cramping really sort of chill out in a pretty quick way. And in that same way, a lot of people will consume magnesium at night before bedtime to really sort of help them just sort of drift off nicely to sleep. It's not, the way that I said that, it makes it sound like it's sedative. It's not sedative. It's just calming to the body. But essentially, magnesium is critically important. It's involved in over 600 processes in the body. And so if we don't have enough, all of those processes they can't function at 100%.
Yeah. And I've ran out of this, but the ancient minerals, we've talked about this before, the magnesium lotion, which you can get at the Fab Fertile store there. And I need to order some more, but yeah, I put that on before bed. And that's kind of, it's interesting when you first start using it. It really does. Like I have a pretty good sleep, but that thing just puts you even in more of a coma. So it's, and I know you have a little spray you use too.
I do. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. B12. So this is helping the brain and the nervous system function. It's important for sperm count and female fertility. So miscarriage risk. So taking metformin can reduce B12, and also taking hormonal birth control, which we see that a lot of people being on years of taking the pill that can potentially deplete B12. Leaky gut, which we see a lot, which you get a leaky gut from chronic stress, from antibiotic use, from the pill and more. And those can then start to deplete B12. And then also if you're doing more of a plant-based diet too, so you need to supplement. I think people know that part. But yeah, the metformin, interesting too, where people are, even if there's not any blood sugar issues, sometimes people are prescribed that for IVF because it has been shown to, in studies, help with the efficacy of IVF. But we did a little question there. We had Dr. Tabitha address that topic with metformin. So you can check that out for more information on that. But B12, what's your take?
Yeah, so this one, the biggest problem that I see is that it's not included on a standard blood chemistry a lot. And so if it is low, in a lot of cases, we don't know it. And it's pretty easy to supplement with. It's a cheap and easy supplement to get your hands on. And so it's a pretty easy fix. But always, we're asking the question, why are we low in B12 to begin with, right? And so do we have some absorption challenges, right? Are we getting enough B12 to begin with? And then if we are is our body able to use everything that we're getting through our food? And sometimes that can be thwarted by low stomach acid, which sometimes is caused by an infection with a little bugger called H. pylori that lives in our stomach. And it reduces our stomach acid and it reduces our ability to absorb B12, among other things. But that's one of the contributing factors for B12 being low. And this is another one where we, not quite as often, I would say, as vitamin D, but we see B12 low quite a lot.
Mm-hmm. The next one is iron. Again, we see low iron. I think with women in general, people can have low iron for years. And then you may be taking a supplement, but why is it low to begin with? It could be linked to anovulation. Obviously, it's important for egg health. Again, our thing is to see, why is your iron low? What's your take on iron?
Yeah, so we know that it's important for a ton of different reasons. Like you said, egg health. It's also important for thyroid health and good thyroid levels. Iron, it's another thing that's really easy to test for. It doesn't always get tested. The ideal iron panel is somewhere between 4 and 6 markers. In a lot of cases, when iron is run, it's only 1 marker. And so again, just like with the thyroid, we're missing the whole picture, and we can't always tell from just 1 marker. We can't see the story of what's really going on. But it is really important. And in a lot of cases, if it's low, it's just like the B12. A lot of times when iron is low, it's either that we're not getting enough in our diet, or that our stomach acid is low, or something else is going on in our gut. So perhaps gut infections or other challenges in the gut that are making us not absorb and being able to use enough of the iron that we're getting through the food that we're eating.
The next one is fasting insulin. And so insulin resistance impacts implantation, increases the risk of miscarriage, it disrupts ovulation, especially important if you have insulin resistant PCOS. So the fasting insulin, what's that telling us?
Yeah. So if our insulin is out of range, it's telling us that we have some chronic blood sugar imbalance going on. So when that glucose is out of range and it spikes too high and it dips too low, the insulin starts to go a little haywire at the same time. And this is definitely something that can be rectified. It takes a little bit of time, but essentially we see it in the majority anyway of PCOS clients where, that is one of the major contributing factors to the PCOS existing. And if we can get blood sugar balanced by eating a healthy diet that's relatively low in carbohydrates and that focuses on some good fats and proteins, then usually we can get the blood sugar balanced. And in most cases, the insulin will start to balance itself as well.
Next one we have is the high sensitivity C-reactive protein. So that can be an indicator of inflammation, potential gut infections, leaky gut, like we talked about before. So if it's below 1, it's the chronic versus acute inflammation. So can you kind of talk about the number there and kind of why we look at that so closely?
So this is one where from a doctor standpoint, it usually is an indicator as to whether there's a risk for cardiovascular challenges. But in those cases, we're looking at a number above 3. And in those cases, when the result is above 3, it does mean that there's a higher risk. But anything sort of between 1 and 3, essentially, again, just like all of these other markers, it's telling us, okay, something is wrong in the body. The body's giving us clues here, but it doesn't necessarily mean we're in danger. It just means it's a healing opportunity for us to sort of right the ship. And so it's definitely a marker for inflammation. We see it sometimes in autoimmune conditions. We see it if there's a lot of blood sugar imbalance. We see it if there's a lot of challenge with the liver. And so basically, any kind of inflammation that's going on in the body, which can be from just about any source, we'll tend to see the C-reactive protein start to get a little elevated. And when it gets a little elevated, it basically means that that inflammation has been going on either long enough or intensely enough that it started to affect the C-reactive protein result. And so it's usually a reason for us to pay attention and go, okay, wait a minute, we need to hunker down here and take a look through, all the things and find out what might be the bigger contributing factors here.
Mm-hmm. And then MTHFR, so that's one that we asked for as well. That makes it difficult for the body to utilize folic acid. We always will recommend for our prenatal, making sure you use methylfolate because I think it's like what's got here, 1-4 can carry the gene, but like I've seen anywhere from like 50% of people having the gene variant, which can then have an increased risk for recurrent miscarriage, unexplained infertility, and then the elevated homocysteine. Can you talk about MTHFR and a little bit about that?
It's a genetic marker. It's just like any genetics. There are different sort of variations of it. And some people have 2 markers for it or just 1 marker for it. And those can mean different things for different people. But in general, for any of these sort of genetic markers like MTHFR or COMT, and there's a whole host of other ones, it's basically the thing we always say, this saying we always say, which is genetics loads the gun and our environment, our stressors pull the trigger. And what that means is that for any of these genetic SNPs, they're called, just because we have the genetics for them doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to have the outcome that it can sometimes cause for people. So if we have the right diet and we take care of ourselves in a good way with our sleep and our exercise and things like that, then sometimes the gene doesn't get expressed and it really doesn't affect us. But it does sort of mean that the people with that gene in some cases have to work a little harder than people that don't have it in order to maintain the same level of good health. And in some cases, some supplementation can help. So with MTHFR, for example, sometimes some of the B vitamins can be helpful. And it is because our body doesn't use that folic acid very well. And so folic acid that we're taking in, our body can't actually do anything with it. And we need that methylated folate version in order to be able to make use of it and to use it in our reproductive system.
Can you just talk a little bit about homocysteine for us?
Yeah. So homocysteine is an amino acid in the blood. If it's elevated, we tend to see a leaning toward cardiovascular issues. So heart disease, stroke, Alzheimer's, things like that. And we tend to see nutrient deficiencies. So when homocysteine is elevated, it can point a finger at some of the B vitamins being a little bit on the low side. And MTHFR can cause homocysteine to be a little bit elevated if we have the MTHFR marker or both of the MTHFR markers. But we also see homocysteine can be low for other reasons too. So things like oxidative stress and some of those other kinds of stressors that we've talked about already.
Great. And so any final thoughts on the blood chemistry review, Justine?
Yeah, just, so if you've run the test before and your doctor has said everything looks great, but you're still not feeling well or your baby still isn't coming, there's always something more to look into there.
Yeah, it's to dig deeper and using this as one of your tools to so you can see the full picture, combined with some testing and obviously your health history as well, sort of how you're feeling. So it's not just, myopically looking at test results. It's also looking at how you're feeling mentally, emotionally, and physically. So if you want to learn more about the Fab Fertile Method, you can apply and book a call with me. So take care. I would like to invite you and your partner to a Supercharge Your Fertility Discovery Call. This call is for you if you meet at least one of the following criteria. You've been trying to get pregnant for at least 2 years. You've been through at least one failed IUI or IVF. This call is for action takers. If you're not ready and you wait, the risk is you'll need to wait 2 to 3 months for a spot to open up. If you're seriously considering work with us, go to fabfertile.com. That's fabfertile.com and click on Apply Here. That's Fab Fertile, fabfertile.com, and click on Apply Here. Then you'll be booked in and ready to spend 30 minutes to give you the action plan to getting pregnant naturally. The Get Pregnant Naturally podcast, including show notes and links, provides information with respect to healthy living, nutrition, lab testing, and is intended for informational purposes only. The information provided is not a substitute for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment, nor is it to be construed as such. We cannot guarantee that the information provided on the Get Pregnant Naturally podcast reflects the most up-to-date medical research. Information is provided without representation or warranties of any kind. Please consult a qualified physician for medical advice and always seek the advice of a qualified healthcare provider with any questions you may have regarding your health and nutrition program.